Okay, we're going to be looking at just some of the vocabulary from Biology B, Unit 5, that kind of go together and that sometimes cause a problem for some students. The first word that we're going to talk about is activational effects. Now, this refers, males and females have hormones that kick in later in life, and the effects of these hormones later in life, when the organism is an adult, are what we call the activational effects. Now, a perfect example of that would be, the hormones that cause certain behaviors in animals during mating time, during mating seasons. So we won't go any further than that, but just know that activational effects refer to the effects of hormones, but not at the beginning of life. They're the effects of hormones in an adult organism. And a good example, like we said, is the behavior of adult organisms during the mating season. Classical conditioning. This is, I think a lot of these are very, very interesting. I don't know if you've ever heard of Pavlovian conditioning. It's named after Pavlov. It was a man who did an experiment with dogs. And this conditioning is a technique that associates a natural response that, and let's just stick with the dogs, a natural response that the dog might have, and somehow through what he does, he's going to get that natural response to happen with an unrelated stimulus. And let's go through this and see if it makes sense. Here we have a dog, and if you give food or a bone to a dog, then they usually start salivating. Their mouth moistens up, they're ready to eat. Now, if we had no food around the dog, but we just rang a bell, the dog would not start salivating. His mouth would not become really moist like he's going to eat food or anything like that. It just wouldn't have any effect on him at all. So what Pavlov did is that he put the two stimuluses together. He brought the food on out and he brought the bell on out. Now, the food, obviously automatically would cause the dog to salivate. But Pavlov, not only did he give the bone to the dog, he also would ring the bell. So this is what's really interesting when you get to step 4. After a time of doing this, where whenever the dog was fed, Pavlov also rang the bell. He then would bring the dog out and only ring the bell. And the dog would then salivate without any food being there because he was reacting to the unrelated stimulus. He had been trained, it's a conditioning technique to respond to just the bell. So let's go back through this again. This conditioning is a technique that associates a natural response to a stimulus. Okay, the natural response to a stimulus would be salivating when the bone comes out. But now we're going to associate that natural response to an unrelated stimulus, to the ringing of the bell. So very, very well-known experiment here where Pavlov was actually able to train his dogs to salivate not when food came out. They would do it too when food came out, but they would also salivate if only a bell was rung. So that is called classical conditioning. I think a very, very interesting experiment, and the results are just as interesting. Ethology. Just all we have to really know is just the definition of that word. Very easy. It's a study of animal behavior in the natural environment. So it's not studying them when they're in the zoo in cages. It's actually going out into the environment where the animal lives naturally and studying animal behavior out there. So here's an example of a class going out and they're involved with a study of ethology. Okay, the study of animal behavior in its natural environment. Latent learning is kind of interesting too. Now this is learning that has taken place and you don't even really know it usually, but it's dormant, which means it's not being used, kind of sleeping until a situation requires it. Now, this is kind of interesting the way they stated it down here. Something latent is potentially existing but not presently evident or realized. It's there, and it's not there at the same time. It's there, but it's not going to come out until a situation requires it. You may not even know that you have it. And a good example would be over here. Say you're walking downtown in Boise and you're looking for this office that you've been to before. And so you're walking down, and you don't remember exactly where it is. And so, but you're walking, looking for this office. And as you see an ice cream store, you think to yourself, hey, I remember seeing that store before. It's right by the office. So you continue walking, and sure enough, there's that office right on the other side of the store. This shows that previously you had learned some details that you probably weren't even intending to, like, oh, there's an ice cream shop right next to the office. You probably didn't pay any attention to it. You saw it there, but then that you really have learned that, and that information came back to your conscious, and then you were actually able to use that to help solve a problem. So that's called latent learning. Now, operant conditioning, you probably see this used with parents, working with their children. It works really well. Operant conditioning is a technique that uses rewards to increase a learned behavior. Now, there's a couple ways to increase behavior, and both of these are operant conditioning. I could either use positive reinforcement, which adds a positive stimulus to something, or a negative reinforcement, which is removing something that someone doesn't really like. So let's kind of go through that. We have operant conditioning. Let's talk about the positive reinforcement. This is one I think we use probably, well, I don't know if I could say that now that I think about it, you probably use both, maybe equally when you're trying to work with children. Say that you want a child to pick up his toys in the living room. And so when he does it, you go give him a hug. Or maybe when he does it, you could say something like, oh, now it's time to watch TV. So if you do that enough times, it's positive reinforcement for when that child picks up his toys. He knows he will either consciously or subconsciously, something good is going to happen. He may get a hug, the TV may get put on, and so you will see that child automatically, once you do that over a period of time, will begin picking up his toys when he's finished playing with them in the living room, because you are giving this positive reinforcement to him. We're adding a positive stimulus. Now this would work. I've never tried this. As far as getting a child to put their seatbelt on, maybe in the back seat. So maybe you get in the car with your kids, and you always have to remind them. Then you have to tell them over and over again, please put your seatbelt on. So what a negative reinforcement would be. Remember, we want to remove something that's aversive, something that you don't like. So what we do is we'll get into the car and we'll put a buzzer on. And as soon as a child puts his seatbelt on, you stop, you turn off the buzzer. So you've actually removed something very negative as soon as that child does something that he's supposed to be doing. So if you did that a couple times, you get into the car and that buzzer is on, and as soon as that child puts on that aversive stimulus that he hates to hear, the buzzer turns off. After a period of time, that child will automatically get into that car and put that seatbelt on immediately, so that that aversive stimulus will come out. And before long, the child will start doing it without even having that buzzer on that would need to be removed when he plugs his seatbelt in. So that's a very interesting way of what we call conditioning too. And we certainly use a lot of these things with animals. We use it with children. Just very, very interesting. You ought to try some and see if they work with maybe a family member or a child that's in your family. Now, social learning is another type. It's a Social learning is when someone learns a behavior. It's not, we're not conditioning them necessarily to do a certain behavior, but they learn a behavior by observing or watching or modeling others. Now, this can either be positive or it can be negative. I thought these pictures are really cute. Look at, here's some two men that are walking with this little boy right behind them. They hold their hands behind their back, and so what does the little boy do? He also walks right behind him and puts his hands behind his back. He's observing or watching. He's modeling what the two men in front of him are doing. Now, this is real important here too. If here's a dad reading to a little girl. A lot of times, if a parent will take the time to read to the children, that a lot of times the child, in fact, I guess studies have proven that if they're read to when they're little and they're read to a lot, that they usually have a much higher incidence of loving to read than children that haven't been read to. But when she sees her dad reading to her, it wouldn't surprise me that she will go and read, and I've seen this happen with children. I can't say it happens all the time, but that she would model that behavior and go and read to her dolls. Or maybe even it'll even transfer to when she's an adult, that she saw that when you're a child, your parent is to read to you. And so when she becomes an adult, she might read, a good chance she might read to her children. So, and in a negative sense too, though, we can also see maybe some of the models that you see on TV on a runway or something. They're super thin and they walk a certain way, and maybe they have clothes that are really skimpy. And some young girls, when they watch that, social learning is going on. They're learning the behavior of dressing, walking, looking like them, and oftentimes try to model, people that they see on TV. In my opinion, that would be a very negative type of social learning. So social learning can be either positive or negative. Another one that's cute up here is where the dad is mowing the lawn, and then he gets a little play mower for the child, who can then, watch, observe the dad and model the dad's behavior. It's a way of learning things. So social learning happens so much in life, and it's very important around our children that we make sure that they, observe, watch, and model the correct thing rather than an incorrect thing. So those are some of the terms that you're going to be seeing as far as your vocabulary in this Unit 5. So I hope that helps a bit. And what I would like to have you do is just go ahead and give me a call, and we'll discuss these terms briefly over the phone, and then I can give you the credit for it. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll be talking to you soon. Bye.